I'm Shadan Larki. Welcome to Awards Buzz. I'm so excited because I am with the sound team of the eight-time nominated film A Complete Unknown. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so I have to ask you guys first of all, because again, this is Awards Buzz and we are awards nerds here. You are all, other than Ted, who's a first timer to the awards conversation, you were all kind of Oscar vets here. So what was it like to get the call to watch the nominations that morning and sort of see yourselves back in the game, or like I said, Ted, you get your first well,
Hey,
I'll start with you, Ted, since it is your first.
I think I was the one who cared. These guys are like Oscars. We always get Oscars. It's a rare opportunity for me. As a music editor, we're not always part of the sound team. So because it's a musical, being included has been amazing. And yeah, I was up at 5:30 in the morning, keeping my wife up, rooting for us. Also telling myself it's fine if it doesn't happen. Like it's just an award. But was super thrilled when it happened. And to my credit, I didn't wake up my kids.
It's always great being nominated. I mean, this is the sixth time. I'd like to win one, maybe, but
You need me, Todd. I'm the lucky
yeah,
charm.
I'm hoping on that. It's so great. I mean, it's just a wonderful feeling. It really is to be acknowledged for it and to be acknowledged for this film, which really was, blood, sweat, and tears. More proud of this film than almost any other film. It's a great feeling.
Well, I felt sorry for Paul because poor Paul has to keep going to these awards all the time. I don't know how many Oscars he has already. I just felt sorry for the guy. Um, but seriously, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to go out and make an Oscar nominated film. We do what we do and we try to make it the best. And so this is all added extra love. And I think we're all very proud of the film, but you never know. You just never know.
We have a group text going amongst the editorial and mix crew, and that started lighting up that morning, and it was just ping, 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 ping. So that was pretty exciting. And then, you know, uh, like Don said, this movie was, it's great to be here, but it's really special to be a part of this film.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it would have been, this is just icing on the cake, to be honest. It's fantastic. It's always a privilege to be nominated, especially when that nomination comes from, the sound branch, who are your peers and who really understand what sound is all about. It's just a privilege, a great ride into the awards season, and whether you win ultimately or not, honestly, doesn't really matter. You've been chosen as one of the top five films of the year for sound, and that's really, really a great honor.
Says our Oscar winner. But no, I I have to tell y'all, Walk the Line, I watched at a young age, and it was very pivotal for me in my love of cinema and my love of films that explored music. And so to see James Mangold, to see him recognized, first of all, is wonderful. But a Complete Unknown feels like such an evolution for him as a director, an evolution for this sort of genre of filmmaking. I wonder if you would agree, and also how does your work sort of add to that, contribute to that? What was maybe new technique wise? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I'm going to say that most of us here have worked with Jim for 20 years. I think, Paul, you started on a film before us.
Yeah, I've done, I think, 25 years with Jim now.
Yeah.
Great.
Ted and I have at least 18, 20 years with Jim. Um, so we've developed a kind of teamwork code and shorthand where we always approach these films with a kind of reverence for where we want to go and how we want to get there. Um, we always try to do what we what would Jim do? I mean, it's that bracelet that says WWJD. It's what would Jim do? And and so we've literally been trying to make him happy for all these years, and he allows us to go up there and give it a shot, give it our best go, and then he'll tell us which way to go and how to hone it in. And so for Jim, I think this is Jim's pocket. I think this is basically what Jim was born to do. I think for him, telling a biopic about something he loves, like music, and somebody he had idolized, I think in this character, I think is right up his alley. I knew when we started this film it was going to be a comfortable experience for him. He would really enjoy it, and therefore I thought we had a good shot at getting him what he wanted.
Yeah, and I'll say this, having done Walk the Line in this movie, you could think that they're similar movies, but they kind of are incredibly different. And where Walk the Line's a traditional story of the rise and fall and rise again of a famous, rock star in a more of a traditional format. This is about experiencing something. It's really about being there when it happened and creating the environment in which you're watching a movie, experiencing it the way the people at the time would have experienced it, all from where that Timmy playing his own tracks, playing it live, to the way the crowd sounds, to the everything is set up, is more interested and is set up to have that experience of witnessing something rather than tracking the details of a person, especially, because we're not trying to unravel Bob Dylan as a person, and we're trying to show you what made him so special.
Yeah, this was completely right up Jim's alley. It's his favorite. I think it's his favorite time period in the 60s and early 70s. It's about a unique character who was, a poet and wasn't particularly looking for success as we rate it now in 2025 monetarily. He wanted to be his own person. He wanted to be true to himself. It's a film about music. It's a film about love and character development. It has Jim Mangold stamped all over it, and I'm absolutely thrilled for him that he's getting the recognition he's getting this year for it. It's one of his best works for sure.
I do want to touch on the live performances, but one thing that struck me was especially with the way that the sound is used, because it's you have these sort of live performances, these big moments, but then there's a lot of like intimate, quiet moments that he has with Elle's character, with Joan's character, just moments where he's writing, reflecting. Can you sort of talk about this balance of sort of the big and the bombastic live versus sort of these moments that allow us to kind of evoke emotion and feel what he's feeling?
I think that's what a great director does, is takes you through the ride, and Bob's ride is pretty incredible. It's sound wise, it gave so many opportunities to create different environments, and sound really does become a character in this film. And it's really great when that happens, when you're able to do that. So the abilities to do even like the quiet acoustic pieces to the big, performance pieces and all of that, there's just so much depth in it. And from the cityscapes, and then the quiet moments, as you said, with Elle and Monica, and it really gives that opportunity to shape a character. And I think that Jim obviously has evolved. We've all evolved, and I think we're all, at the pinnacle at the moment. And this film really is a pinnacle kind of moment.
And I just want to say, even back to the last question too, film like this in Jim's hands was always going to be, it's exciting and exciting to work with him. And then the sound for a film like this, like Tod said too, the environments that we were able to all create, be it with crowds or with city, to make this a real like Jim loves sound, and so to make this kind of this that's the word I'm looking for, but we created this palette of New York and of the audiences, various audiences and different venues, and sound is so important to him. So it really allowed us to kind of um, do what we do in a really rewarding way, because it's never just put together. It's really thought out. Like Jim is every sound in the film is important, and that's always rewarding on from what we do and our aspect of what we bring.
And again, as you mentioned, the scope, because again, with these performances, sometimes it is these festival performances which have the audiences. Sometimes it's just, Timmy in the studio recording as Bob Dylan. Sometimes he's just, playing the harmonica or behind the piano, sort of working on melodies. So how did you all find sort of the different nuances so that and I think there's 40 performances in the film, and they all sort of have their own sonic element. So how did that come together?
I mean, I think every performance got the same level of care in each venue. I mean, you look at Monica's performance as Joan, the first time we see her doing House of the Rising Sun, we spend as much time in that silence, the moment she pushes the mic away and getting the kind of feel of the tension, the excitement in the room. It's a rare moment where even though we have this giant sequence at the end of the movie, you sit in a theater with people watching Joan in that moment of quiet, and everyone's leaning in and feeling the moment together. But that's crafted. You spend just as much time mixing and getting the sound of so little as you do with so much. I mean, I know Don and Paul and Dave can all talk to all the little elements that go into creating a moment like that, in addition to doing the big moments with giant crowds and PAs.
I think a lot of those really intimate moments, like Ted just described, come down to, how how we had great control over the string squeaks from the guitar and the breathing and thank you, Todd, for your miking, which was great. And being able to hear the body of the guitar, being able to hear um, the body hit your chest, and you get a little thump that comes along with that, and then a finger noise on the frets. Um, and like Ted says, that it's not as complicated as the huge Newport 65 sequence, but just as much care goes into those to try and make sure the audience is really connected with that moment, with the character, and with the silence that is in that moment, and what's chosen to be highlighted and what isn't.
The movie gets to build, as you said, when we start off, we're in the hospital. Or first we start on the streets, so you get the feeling of the streets. You get, you're immersed into that world. And that was really Jim's whole idea, was to really create this real world. And so you go from those moments when you're in the hospital, when it's just him playing, and it starts to build. Everything slowly starts to build up, and the complexity starts to build up. So it goes from a much simpler, musically, it goes from a much simpler, him finding himself, finding these songs, and it builds all the way up through, Newport 65. So it's an incredible rise through it all. And just capturing each one of those moments and making them all sound different, I think, was one of the real great challenges and one of the most rewarding parts about the film.
I mean, that variety is really what makes the film pop. I think if something is sonically similar, I mean, that's just not as interesting. Todd, I read that you mic'd Timmy's hair. Is that true?
True. Yes. No, when in the rehearsals, since there are, I don't know, about eight pieces that he plays without microphones, non-performance pieces where there's not a vintage microphone in front of him, we needed to find a way to mic him, especially for the wider shots. And I had watched in rehearsals the way that he played, and he played like Bob did, where he held the guitar high up on his body. So normally you would put a lavalier on somebody right in their chest, right around here, but there was no way to do that because the guitar body would be covering it. So the only way that I could wire him was to do it in his hair. So that was a great and interesting conversation. It was, when I first approached Timmy and the hair department and said, look, the only way that I can do this is by getting a microphone in his hair. And I would put a microphone inside the guitar also. So I think almost for every scene, there's a microphone inside the guitar, and then multiple ambient mics, to capture whatever room we were in, whether we were in the hospital, whether we were in a club or whatever. But that mic in his hair worked brilliantly. I was so happy with the way that it came out, and it just gave a very clean sound, almost better than a lavalier in somebody's clothes, because it travels. If you turn your head, it travels with your head. It travels, it never changes. The perspective of it never changes. Where if a microphone's on your body and you look up that way, it's going to totally change sound and perspective. But for songs, and for music pieces, it was really quite brilliant. And Timmy even said at the end of the movie, he goes, "I may carry this on with me. I may do this on other films."
Oh my gosh. One thing that I love about sound design is, as you've mentioned, it's not just big bombastic sound, it's where the absence of sound, it's where sound is placed, it's where the sound focuses at times. Can you all talk to me about that and sort of finding the nuances and knowing where to tweak and knowing maybe what areas to highlight versus not highlight, etc.?
Well, Jim is not a he never likes what he calls gray sound, which is just a layer of air or a layer of background cars or um, things that just fill up the track. And he's very specific about keeping, especially in this film, he was very specific about keeping things moving, keeping sound effects that caught your ear, had a reason to be there, and kept the excitement of New York, for instance, going no matter where we were, in the apartment or on the street, whatever the environment might be. Um, so I think a lot of the character of the sound in the film, when it's not musical, is very much Jim driven, and it's very purposeful. It's never just layered because it needs to have something in there. Jim really doesn't like that, and his films always turn out better for him working that.
Yeah, it's very much like you don't use sound as just sound. You use sound as a character development tool. And even something like sitting in a chair has to represent time and place and the person that's sitting in the chair. And if you were to have just a normal, uninteresting gray chair, it would be rejected offhanded. So what you have is a chair that shows the character is angry or frustrated. It shows it's wood, it's old, it's in an apartment that has wooden floors. All these elements go into just sitting in a chair, and that's the approach Jim takes for almost every element in the soundtrack. And so when you're used to dealing with him, and many of us have become accustomed to his ways, um, you look for things that give you character, and be they simple as chairs or footsteps, or you start a car, how does the engine turn over? What are you thinking at the moment? What does the door slam feel like? All these elements are combining to create a character and part of the storytelling. And so nothing is left without some sort of thoughtful impact.
And of course, sound does become very much a character in the film. It is throughout. We have to touch on sort of the big sequence at the end, the riot that breaks out. Sound is so paramount to that sequence because we're literally on the edge of our seats thinking if the sound is going to be pulled or not. What went into that? And I mean, there's so many. I mean, there's the things that are being thrown. There's the performance. There's the crowd. How did you do it? I can't really uh simplify my question beyond that. How did you pull it off?
I think, again, to Jim's credit, he decided to shoot that entire scene as one take. So we did from the moment that the railroad gang comes out till Timmy plays acoustic and goes off stage. That was all one gigantic take. So we did it as if it were a live performance and a live concert. So all of that chaos that happens was all real at the time, and everything happened in real time. So it gave that energy, and it's a different kind of energy when you work like that. You know, if you're breaking it up as we normally film, you're breaking up into segments, piece, 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 and you don't have that fullness to go back to. So by shooting the first masters as one gigantic take, not only was it incredibly complicated, I had over 40 microphones going on the whole thing. I mean, everybody was wired, everything, the audience everywhere, but it it allowed the actors to do and feel the real tension of the moment. And as it built, they all lived it, you know, the purity, from the purity, from the purity guys, you know, from the leaders of Newport, you know, all the way down to the audience. Everybody felt that same kind of energy. And then from there, they were able to build it. And I think that, you know, Paul and others can talk about, you know, how it all escalated sound wise and how they brought it up at that moment.
Yeah,
I want to talk about the crowd in the sense that the crowd was charged with a lot of responsibility. The crowd was supposed to create not only anger but love at the same time that Bob is, you know, changing into electric. So it's very hard to have a crowd have multiple personalities, but that's exactly what we were charged with. Usually the crowd acts as one, but in the sense that when some people were booing, some people were cheering, it just made the crowd more complicated, and that's exactly what Jim was trying to create. And you could see in some of the shots that the people in the crowd were shouting angrily, and other people were grooving to the music, and each one of those elements had to be represented, and they had to take turns because you couldn't do it all at the same time. You couldn't have just like a wave of everything. You had to bring it in, let it resonate, bring something else in. Each thing is motivated so that the next one comes along and there's some sort of motivation. And at the end of the day, we've got what people have told me they thought was a very realistic experiment with the crowd. It was like being there. And we had so many levels of the crowd that it took days and days and days to make the crowd become its own character throughout the film, and at least certainly in Newport, where it all comes to a head.
Yeah, we have to go ahead, Ted.
I'll just quickly say, I think the beauty of the piece is that, you know, here's going to be a scene of a lot of loud music. How do you, and crowds and everything, you got a wall of sound. How do you sculpt it? And that's what makes it have its impact, because it starts off burbling and could have started big, right? So even when we arrive, we have crowd and we have score and we have the Texas gang, and we have to kind of modulate where we come in and make it feel exciting, make it feel like we're anticipating something, but not overshoot ourselves when we get to the first song, Bob's first song. And then that's got to hit hard, but then it's got to still feel like it's escalating. How do you maintain that ramp and excitement without feeling you're getting fatigue of the audience, or it's getting too loud, or it's just getting too bombastic? And that's where I hand it off to Paul, because Paul did such a masterful job of sculpting these elements, and Dave as well, sculpting these elements so we have a shape to something that could just be a wall.
Right. And as Ted said too, when just coming into the concert, they're all wanting Bob before he's even stepped on stage. They want him, and they're loud and calling out for him. And then, what we were trying to do in the mix too is sort of put you there at the concert. And so you would almost feel like you were there and the crowd was all around us. But we didn't want, it was a long sequence, and we also didn't want the crowd to become painful or too loud or to hurt, and yet give them that energy and that sort of the demand of annoyance, anger, and also the love that they was split amongst them. So that was the real challenge in shaping all that, and letting the music, it's also got to do all that while the music's playing. So it was a real balance and a real dance we did through the whole Newport 65 of all those elements.
Yeah, for me, musically, obviously the first song that's electric needed to be huge, needed to be the biggest the biggest sound and most impactful in the film up to that point. But then we had 3 electric songs to get through before he went acoustic again. And so each one of those had to raise in intensity. And I really didn't want it just to get louder, 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 because definitely Dave and I are not fans of driving the film audience out of the auditorium. So I worked on like the second song that was electric, just to change the mix from within, increasing the low end, for instance, making the PA more of a character, making the audience more aware of slaps and reverbs going on out in the Newport audience. And by changing the colors internally to the mix, instead of just making the mix louder, we managed to get more intensity through those 3 songs, to the point where Bob leaves the stage and then gets convinced to go back and play acoustic to give the crowd what they wanted. It was a real dance, and the crowd became a real character during that sequence, so that we knew clearly from the film audience perspective, some of the crowd at the festival was on Bob's side, some of it was not. How angry they were, how frustrated they were, and yet how rebellious Bob was being by getting through what he wanted and not being convinced to do what the crowd wanted.
As we wrap up our interview, I'd like to give you each a moment of final say, and I'd like you to consider 2 things. One is, if there's something that I haven't asked about that you'd like to touch on, please feel free. And second of all, I think, the love of this film and is so palpable in just speaking with you, and the love of your craft. So I'm curious, how does this film impact your craft? Where do you go from here? And are there lessons you've learned? Are there moments that you're going to carry with you? What is the legacy of a complete unknown in terms of your careers and your crafts?
Well, I'm going to start by saying that these guys are great. Wouldn't mind doing 20 more films with them. But in terms of the craft itself, we were offered a challenge here that I've never had before, and that is to do a sort of film with music where the music was all live on the set, and it we wanted to keep it that way, and we wanted to make sure that even though there was music recorded, we could sculpt out the parts that we wanted to hear when we wanted to hear it. And even though music was bleeding on top of dialogue, we could clear out some of that music and use the live dialogue. And it made for a very organic and real sound. Like when you ask about how did we get these sounds in these certain locations, well, that's the sound of the location many times. It's a guide to how we're going to do it. And the idea of looping everything and wiping out all the sound and building it from zero just was not what we were going to do. And so when we actually put it together with the original soundtrack and we cleaned it the way we learned how to do in this particular moment, it's that for me has been an eye-opening experience. And I honestly think we can do almost anything with live production these days if we have the tools. And part of the tools I mean are the tracks, Todd. I mean, like the 50 tracks you give us, that's the basics right there. And then some of the ways we can actually manipulate the tracks themselves. So that was a big deal for me.
I would say for me, I've done 16 music-based films before, but I've never done one without a playback track, without earpieces, or without any click track or time mechanism. So going into this film was really like recording an album while we were recording this incredibly complicated film. And as Don said, I think it's opened up new areas because we kept everything alive while we were filming. Jim wanted to keep this environment where sound was always happening on the set, and it was for the actors. It was to keep the actors in the emotion of those moments, from the Cuban Missile Crisis to when we're playing on stage. Every time we're on stage and we're recording the dialogue in the wings, Timmy was out there playing to the actors so that they had that energy going on the set, which made it much more difficult in post. So now they had to extract out that music because it would never match up with the exact moment where they're going to use the piece. And the new tools that are available gave them, you know, the chance that we could actually do this without having to create falsity around it. And I think, you know, keeping this movie as real and gritty as we did, and we all worked incredibly hard to do that, you know, just to keep it as natural as it possibly was. You know, it really is. It's kind of a one of a kind. I don't think that I'll ever do anything quite like this again. I don't think there'll be a director that's willing to go out on a limb like this, or an actor, and to have Timmy be as good as he was, you know, and to make that decision. And the decision wasn't made all the way in pre-production. It was made really kind of as we were going, that he was going to do this whole movie 100% live. You know, in rehearsals and practice, we had some moments that we were going to do to playback. And Timmy said, you know, I've worked on this for 5.5 years. I am not going to go back on it. I'm going to do it all live. And everybody else stepped up to the plate and delivered. So, you know, without a safety net of a playback track in that, this film, I think, kind of stands alone in the sound world.
Yeah, and let me pick up a little where Todd left off, and to give a little shout out to somebody who I know was integral in crafting the songs that were in. You know, he Nick Baxter was our music producer. He produced the pre-records that they were going to use, and was great about letting them go and working. You know, he helped craft those takes and get the arrangements right, and working with Timmy to get the sound right. And when he let him go on set, he was there helping Todd and Timmy and everybody get it all the way through. So Todd gets a lot. I mean, Nick gets a lot of credit for that. Um, for me, I mean, it's hard to imagine the number of things I take away from this movie, because there were so many challenges on so many fronts, whether it was, you know, wrangling the numerous tracks that, you know, Todd was giving us, to spotting more music in a movie than I've ever spotted. It's more just knowing that you can accomplish something that seems so unwieldy and make it look all seamless. I mean, I think working with these guys and knowing the level of craft that everyone brings to it shows you what you can accomplish, and something that seemed incredibly daunting, for me.
I'll just jump in. You know, loving what we do and approaching this film and the challenges that were presented. You know, it's very rewarding to go through this process with Jim. And I think you know, he gets the best out of all of us. And I think what I walk away with this is, when I go to my next film, and hopefully to come back with Jim again sometime. But it puts the mindset that, you know, what else can I do? What else can I bring? What else can I present? What can we try? And what helps tell the story? And that's what I get from working with him. And I think, like I said, I think he gets the best out of all of us. And so that helps my next film. You know, it's just, that's what I take away.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that's been said here, and I'd also like to give a shout out to Nick Baxter, because he really provided me with some truly great sounding stems and instrumental splits that I could then build on for all of the music performances throughout the film. And I agree with Dave. I mean, this is yet one more Jim Mangold film where it proves that character and story are the most crucial elements in the soundtrack telling of the film. It's not about how polished can you make something. It's not about how slick can you make a transition. It's about purposeful telling the story, sound placement, and mixing. And it's always a joy working with him, because you always come out at the other end feeling that we've collectively as a team, him included, come up with something that none of us could come up with on our own. And it's developed and evolved, and it's all about character and story. And that really resonates with film audiences. It's always a joy to work with Jim and take that forward.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. Enjoy the Oscars. Enjoy your group chat. Paul, I'm so glad we got to see a sneak peek of your pup. And
Sorry
Ted,
about that.
no apologies at all. Never apologize. And Ted, if you don't win the Oscar, at least you win Father of the Year for not waking up your kids. But I do hope you all win, and I hope I get to meet you again. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Having us.
Take care.